Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Bruen, and this week here, as part of Sci-Fi Week, a very special guest, Max Rebo himself, Mr. Simon J Williamson. Simon, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Appreciate you taking the time this week to celebrate sci-fi and, of course, the Star Wars franchise, such an important part to the world of sci-fi, without a doubt. So, rewinding back a bit as we take a deep dive into your career, what were some of your favorite films or first films of memory growing up as a kid or a young adult?
Oh God, growing up. Well, the first film I remember seeing was Bambi in a drive-in cinema in Lusaka, in what is now called Zambia, but was then Northern Rhodesia when I was very young. And that was quite an experience because we don't have drive-ins, I don't think, much, or if at all, in the UK. But like America, they had them in Africa. So that's probably my first kind of memory of a film. I've never been asked about what is my favourite film before from way back. It's usually what's my favourite film now. But that's the first one that comes to my mind. Yeah.
And fast forwarding a little bit, when did you decide, this is something I want to give a shot. Let me get into the world of entertainment. Obviously, you've done everything from, puppetry and acting and all of it. So how did you first get involved in that?
I was at school. I was a big fan of Monty Python and all the British comedy of that time, going back to just kind of before Python. There was Spike Milligan, who did a series called Q6, I think, followed by Q7 and 8, which sort of was similar to what the Pythons were doing, but with Spike Milligan's unique slant on things. And I always rather liked Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, who were a comic duo at the time. So it was a comedy. And I just really liked comedy. And I wrote and performed in sketches at a school review. Which was my first kind of introduction to doing that kind of stuff. Of course, it was heavily derivative of Python and other stuff like that, just sort of arsing around basically with funny voices and doing strange things. And I liked it, but at that time, I was persuaded, and easily persuaded, that I should pursue my existing academic career, which was, or not career, but I was at school. So, and I was also keen on animals. So I wanted to go to Africa and be out there on the plains of Africa with a pair of binoculars and a notebook, jotting down what lion were doing, or zebra, or giraffes, or gorillas, that sort of thing. So I kind of abandoned this kind of burgeoning interest in comedy writing and performing to do a degree in zoology at Cardiff University, while also the other thing I was interested in was Bruce Lee. So, and they didn't have a kung fu kind of classes in Cardiff, but they did have karate. So I thought, well, that's as good. So I started doing karate while doing my zoology degree, and that started to take over. I kind of enjoyed that more than my academic studies. And then there was a particular point in my final year when I had to do a dissertation, which was called Some Aspects of the Behavior of the Mongolian Gerbil, brackets, Merionese unguiculatus, close brackets.
Wow.
And in the middle of this, I'm meant to be taking all these readings at various points during the day of how they interacted territorially in a small space. But I preferred to be in the coffee bar, drinking and chatting. So I thought, well, actually, I'm not as dedicated to this whole zoological experiment as I thought I was. So my interest was waning. And then at the same time, there was a a show at the university's theatre called the Sherman Theatre, which was also open to other visiting companies. And someone was doing a production of N.F. Simpson's One-Way Pendulum, which is N.F. Simpson was an absurdist playwright. There were a few absurd playwrights, Ionesco, etc., but he was one of them. And we'd sort of read through the play at school, and in my mind, the absurd theatre that N.F. Simpson was responsible for was very similar to the whole Monty Python thing. So I saw this thing at the theatre, and I thought, yeah, I've still got an interest in Python-esque type of stuff. And then, having discovered the theatre there, I went along to a mime festival called the Welsh Mime Festival, and it was kind of all the best acts from the immediately preceding London Mime Festival, and it sort of literally blew my mind. The stuff that I saw was being done. I just thought, this is amazing, and because of the karate I was doing, I had a certain slightly different movement style that I could call upon. And I found a group of people who all seemed to know each other at one of these mime shows. And I said, how do you know each other? And they said, oh, we're on the course. I said, what course is that? They said, oh, it's the theatre study course. So-and-so's an actor, so-and-so's a director, so-and-so's a designer, etc. And we're having a workshop with the guy you've just seen, the mime artist you've just seen. Would you like to come along? And so, to cut a long story short, I ended up turning up to all their classes, particularly in the Mime Festival, the visiting mime people, and they started to ask me to be in their productions.
Wow!
So I just sort of went for this and was thoroughly enjoying it, and thinking I've found something I really like. And having just got my degree in zoology, I'd been out of work for not very long, because there was a special recruitment scheme to get recent graduates work. And they offered me a job in the nearby botany department. So the zoology department, animals, was just next to the botany department, plants. And I thought, well, it's a job, a temporary job for something like 3 months. I'll do it. At the same time, going to these kind of classes to do with the theatre studies course. And at the end of my kind of probation period with the botany department, they said, oh, we're happy with you. Would you like to make this full time? And then in a decision that I've never regretted, I said, no, thank you. I've decided to become an actor on the basis of what I was doing and appearing in all these student shows. So that's how it all started.
Wow, what a
From
story!
zoology to kind of stuff via karate. Yeah.
You've
And
been a part of so much.
I picked up lots of I was very drawn to the whole mime style and acrobatics and stuff. So that got me into the field, I suppose, of more physical theatre,
Sure.
which ultimately led to an audition for Jim Henson and Frank Oz's Dark Crystal, which I got successfully and worked on for a year. And then about 6 months later, they were shooting Return of the Jedi. And they said, would you like to be in the next Star Wars film? So that's how it all started.
Let's talk about the Dark Crystal a little bit. You were the performer for the Mystic Chanter. What was it like on set? Was that an extravagant set? Was it kind of small?
Well, I'd never seen any sets before, so I didn't know quite what to expect. But it is a big studio, and they're full-size sets. So in the first week of shooting, the first day, we were shooting Mystic Valley, and it's like a 270 plus degree set. It's sort of all around you except for the bit where the cameraman and crew stand, and it was just quite extraordinary because it was so real. You didn't have to walk gingerly over anything because it might break. It's properly constructed, a real mystic valley. And and we were the mystics in it, so we had to the pathway was kind of like a massive spiral from the ground floor going round all the way up to, I think it was the dying mystic, Urza or something, So we were all doing that, walking up there in the incredibly difficult and uncomfortable crouched over positions that we had to assume for the mystics. And actually, that
That,
kind of first week on the Mystic Valley set was probably the most intense of the entire filming, because otherwise there would be a couple of days when you didn't have much to do. You might be a pod person or something in the background. So yeah, and all our rehearsal time, and we'd rehearsed over something like 6 months and shot over 5. All that 6 months of rehearsal period was mainly devoted to the Mystics, because to perform them was required you being in an uncomfortable position for extended lengths of time. And it required quite a bit of training of the body and what it could do. Indeed, Toby Philpott had my kind of position to begin with in the kind of the first group of mystics who were kind of rehearsing first. And after a very short time, he pulled a muscle in his back. And I was next on the list. They said, Toby's out for the next couple of months. You're next on the list. Are you free to start on Monday? When I thought I'd be starting kind of a few months after that. So it was, it was very painful. But, we trained up for it, and it's fun, and it was different, and you knew that about the film going in. It was a totally different kind of film. I think apart from one shot, they're all puppets. The one shot that isn't puppet is Kieran Shah, a little person who is Jen, one of the two Gelflings, running away from camera along a sort of plane.
right.
And obviously it's a bit more difficult to kind of have legs when you're a puppet. You can do it with Kermit because it's stylized. You can have him with legs as well, but with the more realistic style of the Mystics and the Skeksis, the Garthim, everything about it, you couldn't cheat to the same extent. So they did use Kieran for that shot.
And what were the days like there? As far as filming goes, how long of a day was it for you each day?
I mean, they're all long days. You get there early, and you're sort of, I think, probably on set intentionally by about 8 or 9, and then you shoot right through till 5:30. There are certain union regulations that if you need to go beyond a certain point, you have to ask the crew if they're willing to give you an extra hour or half hour, and I think they get a little bit overtime for that. But according to the union regulations, I think you certainly had to ask them. So if they said, no, we're not prepared to work the extra today, you had to suck it up. But I think Jim and Frank, they inculcated a good sense of camaraderie amongst the crew. And I think most of the crews, were willing to bend over backwards.
And what was that very first interaction with Jim like for you when you first met him? What's Jim like as a man?
I'm just trying to think the first time. So he probably would have been at one of the auditions. There were kind of 3 sets of auditions, big workshops auditions, gradually honing down to a smaller group of selected people. So he would have been around and would have said a few words, but didn't really interact. The interaction, I think, came during rehearsal, when every week, I think it was on a Friday, he would give us a group of us mystics and Garthim puppeteering lessons, because we weren't on the whole 100% experienced in puppetry and puppeteering beforehand. So I hadn't done any puppeteering. I was kind of sort of mime, physical acting, acrobatics, and Robbie was a circus performer who did stilts, etc. There were a couple of dancers. There were from Ballet Rambert, Royal Ballet, and Netherlands Dance Theatre, I think. So they were kind of dancers. Toby will have done some puppeteering as part of his kind of street performing. He was a juggler acrobat. He would have done some puppetry, I think, and he comes from a family of famous puppeteers, so that was sort of well within his DNA. But apart from that, we were new to puppeteering. So Jim set up a massive mirror in one of the small cabins that we were rehearsing in as Mystics, and also, incidentally, where they were building the Garthim. So the place was often full of the odours associated with fiberglass. And he'd give us a puppeteering class in the rudiments of puppeteering, that, as you would see on the Muppets, lip syncing in front of the mirror and seeing how everything is. And I don't think we actually did any songs. We may have done, but that would have come in later auditions for other films that the Muppets did. They would always have a song or two in to lip sync to in puppeteering. So Jim seemed very straightforward, very generous, uncomplicated, knew what he wanted, and an all-round nice guy, as was Frank. So yeah,
Yeah,
but
Frank was
again,
another.
to say I sort of got to know him well personally, not really, not to the extent that someone such as Robbie did. I don't know if you're interviewing Robbie Barnett, but he got on very well with Jim and with our choreographer Jean-Pierre Amiel, because Robbie was also very good at French, the French language, and Jean-Pierre Amiel was Swiss French. So incidentally, Amiel was one of the people I saw at the theatre studies course in Cardiff and had been to his workshop afterwards. So at the first audition, I said to him, "Oh, I don't know if you remember, but I was at your class in Cardiff for those students several months ago." And he said, "Oh, yes, of course I remember." I'm sure he didn't, but he's just being polite. But there you go. So it was a kind of strange serendipity to how I ended up in that situation anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you stepped in for Toby. Who were some of the other actors that were the Mystic Chanters?
Well, I was the only chanter. The Uru were the tribe of mystics, and
Mystic.
Sol was the chanter. But so yes, there were others. So Toby was one. Hugh Spite, who played the cook, was another. Robbie was I can't remember all their mystic names, but Robbie Barnett was one. Richard Slaughter, a dancer from the Royal Ballet. Ocon Jones, another dancer. It's terrible to make one name not remember. Dave Greenaway, who had a similar kind of more acting-based background to me. There was a guy called Jonathan Graham who actually kind of left early, not because he was asked to or anything like that. He just decided it wasn't there wasn't enough for him to do on the job, and we'd started filming, so I think he must have been a bit put off by all the times on a film set when you're not busy. So he would have gone through the whole 6-month training process, and at a certain point he kind of felt he had other things he wanted to do. He did a lot of aerial work on tight ropes and stuff like that, very physical theatre. Yeah. So I'm sure I'm missing someone, which would be terrible of the Mystics. You put me on the spot there trying to remember everyone.
Sorry.
Well, apologize to anyone I've forgotten.
So Dark Crystal
Well,
obviously went on to
Amiel
the.
himself, our choreographer, played one of the Mystics as well, particularly a two-person Mystic who was playing a loom. Not playing a loom, that's a harp, who was kind of, operating a loom.
Yes. Yeah. So it moved on to Star Wars and so many big things for you. Obviously, specifically Return of the Jedi, the Max Rebo character. When that was first presented to you, what were your initial thoughts? I think it's such a great character. What were your thoughts when you first saw it?
Yeah, I just loved him. The immediate thing that happened before that was I was going to be playing a sort of browny purpley slug-like character called 6 on the floor of Jabba Palace. So he had 6 legs and 6 red eyes, 3 on each side, and a long snout. And he was a quite unsophisticated puppet in that I'm mostly under the stage, and my arm is in his back. So this is the stage is here. I'm underneath the stage, and I'm operating him. And there wasn't a lot I could do other than kind of undulate and make his sort of back and spine move. And it turned out that the director, Richard Marquand, and George Lucas himself had a bit of an argument about whether they felt the character was interesting enough to remain in shot. And he sort of was in, then he was out, and then he was out, definitely. And so Phil Tippett, who was kind of in charge of all the creatures, said, "Oh, well, there is this other character we've got up our sleeve. Do you want to have a look at him?" And I had a look in this, went up the stairs, and in the middle of this room there's this bright blue, wonderful looking character who was clearly only two-limbed. So, and the idea was he's playing the organ with his feet, and I thought, this is such a great idea, and he looks cool. Yes, I certainly want to play him. And because he was bright blue, and the intention on the set was that there would be a lot of smoke around, so that when lights are shone, sort of beams of light shoot out through the smoke and look very effective. And when the organ, when you depress a key, it sort of allows a little brass flange below to drop down, and that would shoot out the light. And it doesn't, the actual final film doesn't quite have that effect, but that was the effect they were going to. So he's bright blue in the middle of a somewhat dark and smoky set. He's going to have impact, and he's got this rather strange body. So he's actually more of a suit than a puppet, because in a puppet you'd probably expect my hand to be controlling his head, but in fact my head is kind of behind his trunk. So at side view, my head would be here, and the trunk would sort of come down like that in front of me. So, and then of course I've got my arms in his feet. So it was a shock to me when they started to produce the toys, and you could lift Max Rebo out of the circular organ he was in, and he had arms and legs. And worst of all, in my view, he was wearing diapers. So yes, I wasn't that impressed with the first with the models that came of Max Rebo, but of course I've got used to them now. I sign lots of Funkos and toys, and quite happy to do that. But in my mind, he was definitely, and always should be, a two-limbed character rather than a four-limbed character.
Yeah.
But
without a doubt. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
George Lucas makes up his mind and the marketing about what they're going to look like. So, for example, the return of Max Rebo in the Book of Boba Fett is a different kind of puppet. It's not the same as mine. So, but it's up to them. It's up to them who kind of make it and make changes to Star Wars. I'm just the original performer in the original version of it. And the Gamorrean guards, for instance, in Book of Boba Fett, to me they're too humanoid. They're too skinny. But yeah. So
the Gamorrean guards, what type of costume was that? How was it made out of?
It's all these things are basically a form of foam rubber with a kind of a skin on the top of them, sort of shiny skin-like covering on the top of them. But the basic thing is foam rubber. They're a little heavier and more dense than the Henson puppets, because I think, as I understand it, the Hensons didn't really want to give away their secret formula for making puppets. But the Muppet stuff were very strong but very light. The Dark Crystal puppets were quite a bit heavier. But that doesn't matter, because sometimes the weight and the heaviness of a puppet or a costume you're in actually helps you in the movement style you want to develop for the creature. Yeah.
And what were your thoughts on the Gamorrean guard when you first saw what that look was?
They're great fun. Because it's less restrictive than something like Max Rebo, and so you're freer. You're freer to move around in an unrestrained fashion. And because they're kind of violent, aggressive characters, it's easy to do that. It's a bit like the difference in Dark Crystal between performing a mystic who had to move slowly, A, because they're crouched over, and B, because they're meant to be 1,000 years old or some 800 years old or something like that. And then a Garthim who you're more upright, they look heavier, but it's all fiberglass and you can really smash things around and really let rip. And it doesn't require the precision of movement that slow movement, which you get in the mystics, required. So it was going to both were kind of a relaxation from the more difficult characters, so to speak, and they're both kind of fun because they're kind of violent and aggressive and thresh out.
Yeah.
It's great fun.
And obviously with Dark Crystal, it's your first big production. It's going to be special. It's got a special feel. But did you realize how big of a film that actually would become? Because it has become a cult classic.
Yeah, no, not really. No, I didn't. As you say, it was my first film, and because I want to work and have worked in wider areas of the industry, looking back, I wish I'd taken the time on the 11 months I was on Dark Crystal to actually speak more in depth to some of the other heads of department, to the editing team, to the director of photography, cinematographer, I think you call them in the US, and that sort of thing, and actually develop contacts in a more robust way for my own later kind of smaller exploits into filmmaking. Yeah, that would have been a proper kind of extra advantage I could have extracted from Dark Crystal. But being involved in a film for a year, nearly 11 months, you do tend to take things for granted as well a bit. So once we got to the more concentrated schedule on Return of the Jedi, yeah, it was kind of easy. It was easier to do. It was easier to do. Yeah.
Now, for
And
me
of course, it's,
personally,
it's Star Wars, which was a completely known quantity. To be asked to be in a Star Wars film, you don't have to audition or ask to be in it. They ask you. It's flattering for a start. And there have been 2 Star Wars films before, so it's going to be a success, and it's a major, major thing. Yeah, it did seem like Dark Crystal was the one that might be forgotten about. But as you say, it's become a kind of slow burner. It's kind of got its huge amounts of fans who really appreciate it, and eventually, as you know, spawned a 10-part Netflix series many years later.
and did you
Yeah.
have any part in that series, the
In
continuation?
in no, I didn't. No, I gave it a shot. I even did I edited together a video of highlights of my work on Dark Crystal and Return of the Jedi to send to the Henson team to remind them that I was still alive and physically capable of doing stuff. So I'd appear like myself talking to camera in between the clips to just think, just so they know that even at my advanced age, I can, I'm still fit and able and willing. But I ultimately didn't get the call. And I think one person who was a regular on Dark Crystal, the film, worked on the series, and that would have been Louise Gold, who'd done a lot of Muppet work too. I think Donald Austin might have done some work on the film as well as the series, and Mac Wilson. They were certainly around that time, but I might be getting confused because they were both puppeteers on another film I did several years after Return of the Jedi, Little Shop of Horrors, where I
Yes.
was employed solely as a puppeteer, whereas on Dark Crystal and Return of the Jedi, I was more comfortable being a kind of puppeteer stroke creature performer, movement person, whereas on Little Shop of Horrors, which is a fantastic film, I absolutely adore that film. I was just a puppeteer, and at one point, I think one of about 35 to 40 puppeteers, when the giant plant Audrey 2 is at her biggest, singing the musical number Mean Green Mother from Outer Space. Yeah.
That is another classic, another cult classic. It really is.
And the Funko Pops apparently are very rare. The Funko
Oh,
Pop of Audrey 2.
did not
Yeah.
realize
So
that.
I sign a lot of Funko Pops. I can actually legitimately sign 5 of them, which is quite nice. But the
Wow.
main ones I sign, of course, are Max Rebo and a Gamorrean guard. So there's Ursol the Chanter, which is a very rare Funko Pop, and Audrey 2 I've just mentioned. And the 5th one is Nine Numb, because although the main puppeteer is very much Mike Quinn, I'm on cables doing Nine Numb's eye blinks in the Millennium Falcon when there's all explosions going on. So yes, I rather cheekily signed for that one too.
Yeah,
But I always give a
absolutely.
nod to Mike Quinn because he's the main man, really,
Sure.
with Nine
But
Numb.
at the end of the day, still a two-man job right there. What was it like working with Mike Quinn?
Oh, great, great. He was actually on Dark Crystal. He was like a little kid because he did join the Muppets as a kid. Basically,
Wow.
he'll tell the story if you have him on your show, but he sort of, I think he lived quite near the studio, and he sort of turn up and blag his way into sort of saying hello and showing his puppets to Jim, and Jim, being the generous person he is, said, "Oh, would make appreciative noises about Mike's puppet." And at a certain point, he must have said, "Well, would you like to do a little bit of this, that, and the other?" And he was in. So
Wow.
Jim created his career, really, started him off, and really did for many of us. So he was an amazing man.
And you mentioned the disappointment in Max Rebo's action figure. When you take him
Yeah,
out, you see the legs and the arms. Were there ever any other iterations of that figure throughout the years that maybe was a little bit different, or was it always that
I
that
I
situation?
think they're all four-legged, apart
Okay.
from the ones that are sort of glued down and still sitting in the Red Bull jet organ, as it's called, because then if you can't take him out, you don't see that there's no feet underneath, and he's, yeah. But if you look at the photographs clearly, he's sitting on a grey cushion. It might be in this one. If you can see here, that little bit of grey is
Yes.
like a bit like a thing you stick round your neck on an airplane. So he definitely was a two-limbed character.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And who were the other actors that were in the Max Rebo band?
Well, I couldn't see them because inside Max Rebo you can't see anything. But
Right.
Tim Rose and Mike Quinn, between them, at various points they did Cy Snootles, the singer, and then Deep Roy was what's he called? He's gone out of my brain. What is called? He's the little pink pig playing the.
Yeah,
Oh, it's just the name of the character's just come out. It just disappeared. It'll come
I
back to
know
me in a.
Cy Snoodles, but I always forget the third.
Yeah, yeah. Droopy McCool is his name.
Right, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. And then
And
when
Deep
they
Roy,
did
what was he
this,
like?
I didn't get to speak much to Deep Roy, and I've hardly ever seen him on the convention circuit. I think he lives in America, so I've probably only come across him in an American show, although he does come over to Europe. I see Kieran Shah quite a bit. Um, Tim Rose is around. Mike Quinn I saw recently and is around. And then in the special edition, they added 2 or even 3 extra dancers.
That's right.
So they sort of added them, and this character called Yasm, who's all computer generated, who leaps up to shot, with a wah, da 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 da, and then they start the music, which they changed too. They also changed the music, which was kind of another decision that's made that's kind of controversial. Some people like it, some people don't. But the dancers, there was Mercedes was one, and Daylin Chu. I think there was a third. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the originals, so when it comes to the music,
Yes.
I just felt it was so iconic So to change the music, it was kind of it wasn't the
Yeah,
same, you know.
yeah. But I, I sort of, I placed my fingers on the keyboards in relation to the music we actually had, which was piped in. So, yeah.
Right. That's another. Yeah. Exactly.
But it does work. It does work. And indeed,
Yeah.
my first ever celebration I attended, which I think was celebration 3 or 4, the one in Indianapolis. I came back from signing one day to the hotel, and in the bar, someone said, "Hey, do you want to be introduced to the guy who digitally replaced Max Rebo?" And I thought, has he been digitally replaced completely? I don't know. But yes, I think George wanted the ears or flippers to move more than they did live
Wow.
on set, and other things like that. But it looks pretty much like the puppet. So if it is digitally replaced, it's whatever they've done in that regard is reasonably subtle. I
Well, let's
think they've
talk about
still got my
celebration.
still
Oh,
got
what
the,
was that?
my kind of they've still got my kind of key moves in the edit we have.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to celebration and the different Comic Cons and conventions, what are some of the different ones that you've done over the years, and maybe a fan interaction that stands out?
Yeah. Well, I've been all over the place really. Uh, so a lot in the UK and in Europe, and so Holland and Germany. To a lesser extent, France. They're all quite keen on Star Wars. I haven't yet been to Spain, and I'm hoping, touch wood, that I'll get an invitation to one in Italy in the spring next year. I'm waiting to hear on that, so that would be nice. And then further, well, States as well. I've been to a few things over in the States, which is always an adventure, the big ones and small ones. I haven't done Australia yet, but I went to Japan over 10 years ago, so nothing
Oh,
to do
wow.
with Celebration Japan. And I went with Toby Philpott and John Coppinger, the sculptor of Jabba, and John Coppinger's partner. So yeah, so done a few places, and Mexico was fun.
Wow. So you truly
Yeah,
have been all over the world.
yeah, yeah, and that there's probably a convention of some sort, not necessarily specifically geared to Star Wars, but to the whole sci-fi world and the whole film and TV world. Probably several every weekend throughout the year. So it's difficult to navigate your way through. What appeals, and also who's going to invite you.
Right.
And it's not
Exactly.
always clear what kind of reception you're going to get. I've been to small ones where I thought, I'm not sure it's really a Star Wars fan convention. I do very well. And others where you think, oh, there's so many people here. Star Wars is still popular. I'm going to do really well, and don't at all. So you can't really judge. So it's quite nice to go back to a convention you've been to, say, 3 or 4 years before, having left a certain gap, and then to kind of have some expectation of what it's going to be like. The air travel sometimes is not great, particularly on the way back from the States to the UK, because they're overnight flights and I can never sleep on a flight. And occasionally I've gone back from the States to the UK, had a turnaround time of about 48 hours, and then got on a plane to go either back to a different part of the States or to, say, Canada. So, yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be doing too much international air travel all the time. So I split the kind of thing between home-based UK ones and European ones, which are nearer, and the American ones.
I'm sure it
So
can certainly take a toll.
yeah, but it's fun. And you mentioned interactions. I mean, it's become apparent to me more and more over the last couple of years, really, how what a fortunate position we're in, as signers from the original trilogy, because a lot of the fans, when you think about it, the film came out in 1983. Some of them weren't even born then. So I'm
Right.
signing for something, a bit of work I did before they were even born.
Exactly.
And they say like nice things, and the older ones, but the ones of your age, roughly speaking, kind of when they tell stories of how much the films meant to them and how they've followed through that fandom since the original trilogy came out, it's really quite humbling. You know, you see the pleasure they've got from your work that may have been just one particular job, even though it is Star Wars, even though it's Dark Crystal, they're well known, one particular job in a sea of trying to find other work. So going from something like those films to an episode of The Bill, which is a kind of cop show, or Casualty, which is a kind of medical show, you know, it's only part of your career. But now that I don't really look around for acting work, I'm associated still with the films through the convention appearances. So that's fun. That's fun. And also signing things like Topps cards. I did a recent signing for a large number. So if they're not out already, they will be soon. So there'll be other things for collectors to collect. It's just great. And the Max Rebo brand, in a way, is still going. A few years ago, they did a Disney Marvel Max Rebo comic with, I think, 3 different variant covers. It's
Wow.
flattering, and it's just fun, and they're fun things to sign at conventions. And
Yeah.
fans come up to me and say something like, "Oh, Max Rebo, you're really cool," and it's just gratifying. It gratifies
Yeah.
the ego, but it's also fun, and the travel is fun. Apart from what I've mentioned about overnight flights back to the UK when you don't sleep, and one wonderful thing is bumping into people that I haven't seen for years. So I might go for 3 years and not see Mike Quinn, and then see him at 2 in a row, or see Toby Philpott once every 4 years, or out of the blue, I suddenly bump into Hugh Spite that I haven't seen for 7 years. So yeah, it's a kind of social occasion as well, and it reminds you of what you did on those films, and you swap stories and things you've forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
great.
mentioned earlier the Muppets. Obviously you've been a part of Muppet Treasure Island, the Muppet Christmas Carol, the Great Muppet Caper. What were those experiences like? I mean, those are also such great films, and just some really good memories from that era. What was that like filming those?
Yeah, well, I did like the Muppets, and of course, when we first met Jim Henson at the the first auditions for Dark Crystal, you go, "Oh God, this is the Muppet guy!" But of course, the whole style of Dark Crystal was completely anti-Muppet. They were realistic style of movement rather than the cartoony kind of stuff. Although you might say the pod people kind of veer towards Muppet-like characteristics at a certain point. Have a character go along, then look at the camera, and then zoom off,
Yeah.
which is kind of like a nice thing about the Muppets. But as for my work on those films, I would say minimal. I would say background Muppets rather than principal Muppets. So on Muppet Caper, that was actually shot at Elstree Studios back to back with the Dark Crystal. So you finish shooting one film, Great Muppet Caper, on a Friday. On the Monday is the first day of shooting of Dark Crystal. So
Wow.
we were rehearsing our kind of either Garthim or Mystic moves when they were shooting a certain sequence in Great Muppet Caper, and they came in and said, "We need some extra Muppets." And because we'd had these weekly Friday night tuition sessions from Jim himself, we were kind of able to do Muppets, but they're background Muppets, not principals. So I feel
Sure.
lucky to have had a very tiny part in those three Muppet films. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite character in the Muppets, whether you were performing them or not, just in general?
Oh God, yes. It's my initial thing is to say animal, but mm, maybe Kermit. Kermit or Animal. Kermit himself. I mean, Kermit is completely iconic. But then Animal has such appeal. I saw a wonderful clip someone had posted on YouTube the other day, which I forwarded, and it's just hysterical. It's Animal is background musician, and Rita Moreno comes on to sing Fever. And
Oh, yeah.
honestly, I don't want to ruin it by kind of saying the beats of the particular sketch and how it pans out, but
Right.
it's absolutely wonderful. It's both touching and funny. Yeah. So, Animal and Kermit will be my favorite Muppets, I think.
Muppets just always had such a wholesome feel, and it was always a great adventure. I think Jim really did a great job with putting together those films, and there were so many of them, and they were so
Yeah.
very different from each other, but they all stood out in their own way.
Yes. I did, because I mentioned kind of other things I'm doing in the industry or have done in the industry. So I'd like to be writing and directing, but I can't really get much work there at the moment, to my frustration. But I did actually propose to Duncan Kenworthy, who was still working for the Henson Company. He was the associate producer on Dark Crystal.
Oh.
And I came to him with an idea, and I'd worked out what Muppet characters would play what, of the Muppet Macbeth. So Shakespeare's Macbeth story with Muppets in it.
Ah.
And he basically said, actually, we can't read this legally. We can't read anything that has the Muppet characters. So, yeah, I
Oh, that's
might
too
try and
bad.
persuade someone at some point in the future, to do the Muppet Macbeth.
That would be great. Yeah, that sounds very interesting.
Well, you know who'd be Lady Macbeth, of course.
Miss
Miss
Piggy.
Piggy. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And then, of course, rewinding back, 1986, you did 3 episodes of Alice in Wonderland. What was that experience
Oh,
like?
oh, that was nice. Yes, it's a curious job, because I ended up rehearsing it, doing it twice, or being paid twice. And the
Oh,
story was, well, I was honestly, it had all these creatures. So I approached the BBC producer director, a guy called Barry Letts, who was the producer on several series of Doctor Who in the past, and he was doing Alice in Wonderland. So I met him for this, and honestly, so gracious and generous a man. When I was waiting downstairs in the reception at the BBC, he said, "Well, come up to the third floor," and he was waiting for me by the lift, and because of all the work I'd done on Return of the Jedi and Dark Crystal. So it's nice to be thanked. And no, I played a character that, to my knowledge, doesn't appear in Lewis Carroll's original, a Robin, and
oh,
the the characters were kind of up, sort of unsophisticated, where they're just kind of people with masks. So I had a bird mask. Otherwise, I'm dressed in a three-piece suit, and I decided to play him a little bit, his movement a little bit like Charlie Chaplin.
okay.
So that was fun. And then we rehearsed that for, I don't know, the usual sort of time on a reduced BBC TV schedule. And we got to the point where we're almost ready to shoot. We were due in the studio the next week. The studios at the BBC has all been booked. But there was an incoming scene shifters strike. And so Barry Letts said to us, they said, "Well, listen, we're gonna rehearse right up to the point where the Friday, so the Monday you'd be starting work. I think there probably will be a strike, but in case it's called off, we're all ready." And it wasn't called off. The strike went ahead, so we'd rehearsed, we'd got paid for rehearsals, etc. And then about, I don't know, just under a year later, call it 9 months, he said it's on again. So we had a little bit of top up rehearsal and then shot it finally. So I got paid twice for the same job.
Wow, that's
And
fantastic.
yeah, he managed to get back about 80 to 90% of the people, the cast from the original, which tells you that a lot of actors are out of work.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah, they're still available 9 months later. So yeah,
sure.
that was a nice little job, and he was such a lovely person to work with. Alice herself was played by a redhead, which is unusual, Kate Dorning. Normally Alice is definitely a blonde. And the other thing about Barry Letts was when I went to, I mentioned I'd bought in a secondhand bookshop a pictorial guide to a previous film version of Alice in Wonderland directed by Jonathan Miller, which had an extraordinary cast, including people such as Dudley Moore and Peter Sellers. And he said, "Oh, would you show me this book?" And I showed it to him. And he said, "Yeah, it's amazing." He said, They got together this truly wonderful cast, but the costumes are awful." And I had to agree with him. So check out the Jonathan Miller directed Alice in Wonderland and see if you agree or not.
I
It's
will,
probably a bit
absolutely.
easier to find that film than it is to find a BBC TV program from the archives.
And when it comes to Little Shop of Horrors, why don't you elaborate a little bit on your experience, filming that movie?
Well, I was one of several puppeteers on it, so I didn't feel very original or particularly singled out. And I played a tendril or two, not even a singing pod, which other people got to do. So I didn't have a lot to do, but it was fun because I'd seen the musical off Broadway when I went over there to visit to New York and stayed with one of the Muppet people, Bobby Payne. And he said, "There's this amazing show that lots of people in the Creature Shop have kind of had a part in. And someone from the Creature Shop, Marty Robinson, is actually playing the plant." So I went along to see it. And there were people, afterwards to speak to, such as the wonderful actor Raul Julia. And it was just a terrific tongue-in-cheek show with wonderful, catchy music. And they actually said to me, "Well, we're actually bringing the show to London in a few months' time. Would you like to play the plant?" And my answer was, "No, thank you." And the reason was laziness, I suppose, or something like that. It's because it's one thing to do a puppet or a creature on screen in takes that would only last like 45 seconds, a minute, maybe even shorter. But then to be inside a costume on stage for every night for 8 performances a week for like an hour plus, I just thought, no, I don't fancy it. But I said,
Yeah,
but I would like to audition for Orin, the dentist, which is obviously, you remember, it's the Steve Martin part from the film.
sure.
So I learned I got it. I got the song from the Hensons, got the kind of book and yeah, I didn't do a good enough audition. I didn't get it. So, but that would have been great. I would have much preferred to play a human being because after Dark Crystal and Return of the Jedi, it was a job to take me seriously as an actor, which I'd done beforehand. So I had to kind of turn work down to get into the position where I could play human beings again and have, my face and my voice. So, yeah,
And what advice do you have to somebody that's aspiring to either be a puppeteer or an actor?
right. Start with the puppeteering one first. I didn't start as a puppeteer, so it's kind of slightly secondhand knowledge. But in my experience, most of the puppeteers I've met are actual puppet builders as well. So if you are a puppet builder and want to perform, I just keep on doing that, perform wherever you can. You never know who's watching you. Yeah, check out, I think Equity now have a puppeteers committee, a puppeteers section, which they didn't have when Dark Crystal was being made. Yes, make contacts, but yeah, if you're a puppet builder and performer, it's probably easier than just trying to be a performer. I think that would be unusual. And acting, I'm a bit out of the acting field now. When I was last looking for acting work, we used to send photographs and CVs through the post. Now, not only is it all done by email, but now most of the time you don't get to audition with anyone face to face. You do a
Right.
self tape. And I've never really been part of that. But I'd sort of my interest in acting had kind of lessened as I started to go on to write and direct stuff. So my attention sort of had gone into that. So I think the only way you'd see me act again is someone had come out of the blue and asked me if I want to do it. But I'm not actually out there looking for work.
Yeah.
But the similarity of advice for puppeteering also applies to acting. Do as much as you can. You never know who might see you or where. Yeah, I once wrote while I was still doing my zoology degree in Cardiff, and I had this inkling that I wanted to do something, with acting, comedy specifically. I wrote to several of my absolute heroes, which would have been every single person in the Monty Python team: Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, and also Alan Bennett and Jonathan Miller, the same Jonathan Miller who was the director of the Alice in Wonderland we've talked about. Because Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, Alan Bennett, and Jonathan Miller were in a troupe, comedy performers that came out of Oxford and Cambridge University that predated Monty Python. So I wrote to all of those, and the comedian Dave Allen, and Spike Milligan, all the names I've mentioned possibly before. And I just wrote a kind of letter saying, listen, I just got my degree in zoology. I don't want to continue doing that. What I really want to do is this, that, and the other in the comedy, but also drama field, but mainly comedy, I felt. And quite a few of them replied to me. And by far Spike Milligan wrote a wonderful letter back to me, all about kind of how he'd tried things and been kind of turned down and not to give up. But the best one came from Dudley Moore, which was really, go ahead, just keep on performing stuff wherever you can. Just believe in yourself and just do it. Just keep on doing it, because you can't intellectually become an actor. You have to do it. You have to do something in front of an audience, and even if you're not good to start with, you persist with it, you're going to get better. Hopefully you'll reach a stage where not only are you better, but you're one cut above everyone else, or you're outstanding in some way. You have a little definite place and an ability that's obvious there. Yeah, but it's a tough life, in a lot of freelance professions in the arts world generally. Anything freelance and creative, you've got to keep on believing yourself, which can be hard, because if you have auditions, or like 3 auditions or 10 auditions, let's say, and you don't get any of them, it's bound to dent your confidence a bit.
Right.
So I think a lot of the people who do really well get a break really early on, so they don't suffer that early drop in confidence. And so much of it is about confidence, particularly with comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have a keepsake, something from your career, all the projects you've done? Is there any one piece maybe that you kind of hold close to you, or you've obtained over the years?
Oh. Well, more recently, I got myself one of those Max Rebo plushies that I rather like. And I'll sometimes, when I'll do a video to announce my appearance at a convention, I'll bring up the little puppet. It's like a puppet. It's not really a puppet, but I'll bring up the doll. Yeah, I quite like that. No, I don't think I have anything. I'm just thinking, looking around the room. Do I have anything that... There's a nice dark crystal poster, but nothing like a talisman or a lucky mascot. No.
Sure. And all that you've accomplished throughout your career, if you could maybe get it down to one favorite moment throughout your career, what would that one moment be?
Actually, it's doing some acrobatics on stage in a show at Bristol Old Vic called Fred Karno's Army. I
Wow.
played one of there was a troupe of stand-up comedians and acrobats, jugglers, run by a guy called Fred Karno. And he started off both Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin were in his troupe. And so they did a musical show about Fred Karno's life. And yeah, so there's probably no video recordings of it, or any. If there are, they'd be pretty scrappy. But that's probably my favorite bit of work, because I was combining an acting role with doing kind of flips around stage, and it was kind of really in my wheelhouse in terms of interest and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a marvelous job to do. Yeah.
And where
But of
can
course,
fans follow you? Oh, sorry.
the ones that get most attention, of course, is this chap here, the blue chap. So, which I'm very grateful that people still are interested in Max Rebo, and also, the Gamorrean guards. I'm the Gamorrean guard who gets eaten by the Rancor, which was
Yes.
a kind of favourite acting moment in the film for me to do. That was great fun.
And how
Yeah.
was that process during that? How did they actually do that?
Well, the stuntman does the fall, and then the camera picks me up, getting up onto one knee, then getting up fully, facing Luke Skywalker, and then turning round in reaction to a portcullis opening, which I don't see. So I'm looking in a direction, and I don't know what the Rancor looks like, no, except that it's this high, and I have to react as if I'm running away from this monster. Yeah, that was fun, because
Wow.
as I've said many times before, I'm running across the stage into this kind of slight incline, a gully towards a kind of little exit that is blocked off anyway. And so I've launched myself at this angle. I'm off balance. I'm acting hugely, because you have to act big physically within a big costume. Otherwise, it doesn't read. It doesn't read as any movement coming from inside. And at the same time, I'm aware that my Gamorrean guard foot is swiveling off. And I'm thinking, well, if they can see the foot is swiveling off, they'll call cut anyway. But yeah, that was quite fun, because I looked at the absurdity of the situation, and I'm chuckling away inside the costume. But because it's a big costume, that chuckling doesn't read at all. So yeah, that was great
And
fun.
fast forward many years from now, what would you like your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
Mm, mm. Well, I really would like to get one of my screenplays made, even with me directing. That would probably be a bigger personal source of pride and legacy for me than anything in Star Wars and Dark Crystal. But that's because it's personal to me. It's something that's, I've created it entirely from the ground up. If that doesn't happen, then I think, aside from the more general personal things about the people in my life, what I hopefully will have meant to them, and hopefully, it's good and everyone has nothing but good to say about me, rather than, oh, what a bastard he was. Yeah, apart from that and your impact on the loved ones around you,
Yeah.
yeah, Max Rebo, that, he's, yeah, everyone knows him. Not so many people know Ursol Lachanta, even though the work on Ursol Lachanta was more difficult, and therefore the challenge overcome was more than that on Max Rebo. Yeah. Yes, I'm probably going to be, the blue elephant actor at some point.
Well, hey, it's been great, Simon. Thank you so much for all of your contributions and
Yeah.
all that you've given to us. We've had so many great things come out of your career. So I thank you for that, and thank you for joining us here. It's
Have
been
we
a
got a
pleasure
bit
to
more
have you.
time? Have we got a
Yes,
bit more
absolutely.
time?
Yeah.
So this is a kind of lovely photograph of Max Rebo I appear behind me. But this is the one from the Book of Boba Fett, which is not me.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you see me at Comic Cons, then hopefully I won't be signing one of these. I'll be signing one of those.
The
So
original.
yeah. This was given to me in Ireland I think it was Ireland by someone. I thought, it's very nice, but it's not my character.
Right.
But
Right.
also in Ireland, I did a small convention in a place called Navan, which I think is where Pierce Brosnan comes from. And there was a local artist who was asked to do an illustration. And it's this, which is, sorry, it's curled up rather. So
Wow.
getting close. I
Oh,
just,
yeah.
I just thought it's really nice. And she's
Yep.
such a, it was the convention organizer. It's called Sci-Fi Talks Ireland. They pick local artists to do an illustration, and that's what they came up with. And the artist, in case you want to find her or commission her, she's
Yeah.
called Shizuka, which is SHISZUKAA. And it's Shizuka, her email is shizuka@gmail.com, or the Instagram is @Shizuka, all that spelling. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, we'll definitely get the word out because that was a great piece.
It is. It's marvelous. In fact, just before the convention, they sort of gave me a preview, and I stuck it on Facebook, and people said, "Oh, where can I get one of those?" And I have a few, but I'll probably be bringing them to conventions in America rather than sending them through the post, because at the moment, since the tariffs came in, it's a whole lot more complicated sending signed autographs back to the US, for which I apologize. I haven't found a way to be able to do it seamlessly now. But if I am at a convention in the US, then hopefully I'll be able to bring some of those posters as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I
I've had
do
the
have an
pleasure.
American convention coming up, but it hasn't been announced officially yet, so I'm probably not allowed to reveal it yet.
I had the pleasure of meeting you at Foxwoods Comic Con.
Oh, wow, that's a long time
So,
ago. Yeah.
yeah, that was probably, I don't know, 2017, 16.
Gosh,
And
yes.
yeah, it'd be great to have you out this way again, maybe Rhode Island Comic Con or something like that.
Rhode Island. I did Rhode Island a few years back. I'd love to go back there. It was great fun.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Simon, for joining us. It's been an
My
absolute
pleasure.
pleasure. And for Max Rebo himself, Simon J Williamson, I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and thank you for joining us for Sci-Fi Week.
And watch the others.